so good to be here today with all of you and all of the children that are here and all of you who believe in justice and fairness. There is this scripture in the Bible found in the 2nd chapter of Luke, and it talks about how it says that they had to take Jesus outside or keep him outside because there was no room in the inn. And I want to talk today a little bit about no room in the inn for our children, on the right to an education of our Latino sisters and brothers, and on the need for leadership, because it is a shameful reality when there is no room in the inn. I want to thank Alex Shirley from our Legal Redress at the NAACP and all of my good friends that I see out here on today. One of the facts we have to remember about Christmas is that Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus were treated as though they were illegal. The government wanted their money, their taxes, and their labor, but the same government did not want them to have dignity, worth, and recognition as fellow citizens with the common humanity. It was not safe during the first Christmas to be different from the empire. If you were not Roman, you did not mean much, and you were seen as a tool to be used, not a person to be respected. This was the context of Jesus' birth 2,000 years ago this evening. Jesus began his life as an alien with the experience of being unwelcome. Now, one writer says Jesus represents what we call backdoor divinity. He came through the back door to identify with the oppressed and to challenge those who take God's world and act as if it's their world, to challenge those who are quick to label people as aliens and illegal, whom God has declared are brothers and sisters made from one blood. When Jesus came, he found no room in the inn. The dominant culture did not welcome him. He was left on the outside. The rules of politics and fears of leaders exiled him in the very world that he declared God so loved. And whenever we participate in this kind of unwelcoming attitude and action against fellow members of the human family, we commit this sin all over again. While we are all talking about Christmas, many of us are celebrating Christmas, let us remember the theology of Christmas. And at its very core is the welcoming and embracing of all humanity with God's marvelous love. And that love exposes the hypocrisy and sinfulness of attempting to deny fundamental opportunities to those who live among us. Any attempt on the one hand to claim allegiance to the Christian faith and then turn around and engage in political separatism is wrong. It's as wrong as it was for the slave master to worship Jesus on Sunday and treat black people as subhuman property and 3/5 of a person on Monday. The truth is, except for the Native Americans and the descendants of slaves, we're all immigrants. In the case of our Hispanic and Latino brothers and sisters, we cannot forget that the states like Texas and California were once Mexico. Part of the problem is we talk about these issues without historical references or proper historical references. How can you take the end during one part of history and then not let people back in the end that they once owned in another part of history? For instance, look for a moment at the history of Texas. Mexico's 1924 Constitution joined the area we now call Texas with Coahuila, the adjoining state on the southern banks of the Rio Grande. The Mexican Congress allowed the area to be called Texas, the option of forming its own state as soon as it feels capable of doing so. Mexico enacted the General Colonization Law in 1824, empowering all heads of households, regardless of race or immigrant status, to claim the land they lived on in Mexico. The first large land grant made when Spain still controlled the area was made to European Americans, called the Old 300, who had moved to the banks of the Brazos River in 1822. The Mexican government ratified this grant and many more land grants to white Americans. Many of these white Americans who were immigrants at this time in Mexico, settlers owned slaves, which had been outlawed by Mexico in 1829. Mexican President Anastasio Bustamante ordered all slaves owned by white Americans who had immigrated to Texas to be freed by 1830. To get around this law, many of the slave owners said their slaves weren't slaves but indentured servants for life, and they had 5,000 slaves in Texas by 1836. The United States made several offers to buy Texas because they wanted to keep slaves. the president of Mexico turned him down, and then outlawed immigration of U.S. citizens to Texas in 1830 and set up agents in the Texas state of Mexico to monitor immigration. The point I'm trying to make here is the very end that we try to keep people out of now, they used to own it. Scapegoating immigrants is as old as America, the land of immigrants. In 1854, for example, there were 4 times as many legal and illegal immigrants compared to the relative size of the nation today, according to Dr. Leon Fink of the University of Illinois in Chicago. What happened in 1854? A new political party was formed to stir up emotions against immigrants. It was quickly called the Know Nothing Party, and it campaigned solely on the issue of illegal immigrants. By 1855, the Know Nothing Party had elected a mayor in Chicago who promised to bar all immigrants from jobs. The Know Nothing in New England were able to pass laws regarding the reading of the Protestant Bible and barring the teaching. Listen to this is what was going on then that's happening now. And barring the teaching of foreign languages in their public schools. In 1855, Kentucky had 20 German immigrants that were lynched because of all of this hype against immigrants. At the same time, however, there was another movement and another party being formed called the Abolition Movement. It was fueled by righteousness and a desire to rectify the great sin of slavery committed against the human family. It ran counter to the Know Nothing movement. Dr. Fink recently wrote, a lawyer from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln came forward to provide political leadership that undercut the Know Nothing Party. Now, what's the point this morning? The point is, this is the kind of moral leadership we need in our elected leadership today, like Abraham Lincoln. Surely there must be leaders and candidates for leaders that have the courage to provide the same kind of leadership that will challenge this attempt to divide the human family, that will unite black and brown and white working people and create stronger labor and human rights rather than divide them. When there is no one else to blame for our problems but ourselves, one of the first divisions that always rises up in America is to blame the foreigners, people with dark skins and funny accents. We are disheartened in the NAACP by the would-be leaders of our great state so quickly joining the ranks of the modern-day Know Nothing Party, lending fuel to the scapegoating movement against our sisters and brothers who have moved here from Latin America. We believe everyone who would lead our state, Democrat and Republican, should clearly state that they believe in the Christ side of Christmas, and that our young sisters and brothers from Latin America should not be deprived of their rights to an education in our exceptional community college system. We should not do the wrong thing and then try to call it the right thing simply because it's an election year. Martin Luther King reminded us that leadership should not merely be thermometers that measure the temperature, but leadership ought to be thermostats that change the temperature. We should not, as a society, stoop to the depths of moral opportunism, unleashing the dogs of prejudice and fear instead of standing strong for right to a higher education. I was lifted when Governor Mike Easley stood up for the law and the moral right to learn, like many of you. I was thrilled by the Christian spirit in Dr. Martin Lancaster's defense of the moral and legal right of undocumented immigrants to a higher education in the community college system that he leads. Dr. Lancaster, who is retiring from leading our community college, stood tall. And we ought to think about what his arguments were. He said that since 1958, when the first industrial education center was established, community colleges have had an open door policy. This meant that from day one, anyone without regard to educational background or attainment, race or ethnicity, social or economic standard should be admitted to benefit from our programs. He then went on to lay out some other things that we ought to continue to reiterate. Number one, the vast majority of students who might pursue an educational opportunity at the community college came to this country as children, and they had no choice in the matter. They were brought here by their parents. Now, how can these children now be considered as lawbreakers? Number two, he said each of these students had an opportunity to receive a free public education, in many cases from kindergarten through the 12th grade. And some of them have even graduated as valedictorian or honor graduates. Therefore, the perverse thing about the position many would have us take is that parents can strap a 1-year-old child on their backs and cross the Rio Grande, and 6 months later have a second child, and the two children will be treated differently just because of a decision of the parents. Third, to attend a community college as an undocumented immigrant, these students will have to pay $7,465 a year as a full-time curriculum student, which is $2,090 more than the legislature gives a community college to educate a full-time student. Therefore, there is no state subsidy for these students, and people need to stop suggesting that them going to the community college is actually costing the state. Number four, in every area of American history, the latest wave of immigrants, whether it's the Irish, the Czechs, the Poles, the Germans, and yes, even those who were brought here involuntarily, the African Americans, have faced the same opposition that our Hispanic and Latino brothers and sisters face now when they arrived on this shore. We are a nation of immigrants, and if one reviews the names of those who have called the system office, the community college systems office, in opposition to the door policy, President Lancaster said that if you look at those names and trace the history, you will have to conclude that 50 or 100 years ago, these were their grandparents and their great-grandparents faced the same opposition that Hispanics face now. In other words, they come from immigrants too. Number five, unless the federal government fulfills the obligation to address the whole immigration issue, it is highly unlikely that these students will ever return to their countries of origin, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Therefore, they will remain in North Carolina or some other state and be a significant part of the workforce in the future. To say that undocumented workers can't work in North Carolina ignores the fact that thousands of them are already working today in almost every field we can imagine. Then Lancaster said this, number six. He said many European countries are now experiencing more significant violent, destructive, and terrorist activity by immigrants than we are experiencing in this country. For years, these countries have denied immigrants basic rights and services, creating a permanent, disenfranchised, and angry underclass. By refusing to educate and make productive members of our society the children of undocumented workers, North Carolina and the United States face some of the same things we see happening in other countries. And so I express my deep gratitude to Dr. Lancaster. His arguments parallel the national NAACP policy, and I wanted to say that today so that people understand that they will not separate us along the lines of black and brown. Our policies at the national NAACP, which are the policies of the state NAACP, which are the policies of the local NAACP, says quality public education for African Americans and Latino students is persistently threatened as a direct result of inequitable school funding. Generally, wealth school districts have higher per pupil expenditures than high-poverty districts. The NAACP is committed to working with local education agencies to reduce resource disparities by 50% and to guarantee that African American and Latino students have an opportunity to a constitutional fair education. But I want to also say that I'm disappointed in leaders who have openly and strongly opposed the position of the governor and President Lancaster. We cannot grovel in the face of the carefully orchestrated anti-immigrant hysteria that is nothing more but a reincarnation of the know-nothings of 1854. It is wrong and foolish and contrary to the very theology found in the Bible upon which candidates place their hands when they take office. Those of us who are descendants of slaves know this theme of scapegoating too well. We know what it's like to be told there's no room in the inn. Our would-be leaders have fallen for the same scapegoat trick that every black person who has not lost their sense of smell can recognize a mile away. Whenever the number of good jobs declines, whenever we get bogged down in an unwinnable war, whenever those in power have no realistic ideas short of borrowing trillions of dollars to start unnecessary wars, about how to increase the pool of good jobs, those in power often fall back on the tried and true tactic of scapegoating a group of people, causing us to fight ourselves rather than fight the systems that are creating the problem in the first place. To turn us against each other. And normally the group that they call on us to fight is the group whose skin color is a shade darker than those in power. Those in power point the finger of blame at them for all the problems of this society. And I tell you, our people have been there, and we've done that. And we have, through the grace of God, suffered and survived through centuries of being scapegoated. We did not create a single cotton crop economy during slavery, but we've been there. We did not create the post-Civil War tobacco, furniture, textile economy, but we've been there. Our people worked hard in these once profitable but now morbid down exploited economies, but we were not responsible for their creation. We know how important these public colleges are for people of color who were subject to the lash and the death for just opening a book until 1865, and who were not permitted to matriculate at any white college in our public system until the 1960s. Today, as North Carolina undergoes seismic changes in its economic foundation, we will not accept the blame for the problems it suffers. We will not allow it to be put on the backs of poorest among us, or the Latinos among us, or the Hispanics among us. And with the grace of God, we will not accept our leaders shifting the blame to other powerless workers. We need to work through our problems rather than shift the blame. We need to provide every child with a constitutional education. We need to provide health care for all. We need to ensure that workers have labor rights and working rights in this state. We must open up the end instead of tearing people apart. Instead of saying there's no room in the end, or no room in our schools, or no room in our community colleges. We need to bring people together and open up the end. Instead of our leaders misusing and misspending billions of dollars on a senseless war, we must challenge them to stop that war and to spend that money on education and health care and jobs. What we ought to do is give life and hope rather than putting a lock on the doors of opportunity. We must open up the end. Let it not be said that we have made the same sinful mistake that the government of Herod made almost 2,000 years ago, when he brutalized, separated, and scapegoat and banned those people who looked different from him and who did not buy into the oppressive structure and the oppressive nature of the empire. For King Herod lost his humanity in the act of denying humanity, when he shut the doors to Jesus and to Mary and to Joseph. He shut the doors on his own humanity. He violated the imago Dei, the image of God that every person possesses. For the Bible declares that no one is illegal, for God has created every one of us, and we are all our Father's children. So let us not follow Herod. If we're going to be true to the Christmas spirit, let us follow the Christ and open up the end. That must be our call. That must be our charge. And that is why we invite all of our friends, Latino, Native American, African American, Asians, whites of all creeds and beliefs, to join us in fighting for our poor people's agenda, to come back and march on Raleigh like never before, February the 9th, 2008, at our second historic thousands on Jones Street, HK on J. We will again raise our vision of an anti-racist, anti-poverty, anti-war coalition, which is the only coalition that can really make substantial change if it stays together. Black, brown, and white people joining together to address our problem, not just to scream at the darkness, but to offer light, to offer a plan. Our people's agenda includes a right to a constitutional education for all children, Brother David. And we can never retreat on that. We can never stop fighting for that. If anything is illegal, it is illegal in the way that poor children don't receive the same education as other children in this state. That's illegal because the courts have said it's illegal. And also, we come to march on Raleigh to protect the rights of immigrants from Latin America and other nations, and to protect the right to form a union and to engage in collective bargaining. We have not seen the changes that can happen if we stay together. But I believe if we come together, white, black, and Latino, if we refuse the demonic attempts of Herod to destroy us and keep us out, if we build our own ends and demand that we have a place in the end, and we demand that people recognize this is God's world. It doesn't belong to the Republicans or the Democrats. It doesn't belong to those who would scapegoat and divide us. This is God's world. And red, yellow, black, or white, all of our children are precious in His sight, and they deserve that we fight for them and fight for their opportunities.
Our kids who have gone through our public school systems, they've been our students. And as educators, we've advocated for them. We've helped them with their lessons. We've pushed them forward. Now, what would we be if we didn't say, we pushed you this far? Some of you even beat the top students in your graduating classes and didn't say to you, but this is as far as you can go. And that even though we wish you well in all of your endeavors, we aren't going to give you the same opportunity that other students have. And sometimes it's just a quirk of where they were. I like the analogy that Reverend Barber gave. Even within the same family, one child in that family would have all these opportunities of North Carolina and America available to them, and another child would not. So we should not set up a discriminatory factor within individual families. In this holiday season, I'm reminded of the great Rabbi Hillel, who had an expression where he said, if I'm not for myself, then who am I? In other words, I must stand up for myself. But if I'm only for myself, then what am I? And if not now, when? And if not us, then who? And the question really comes down to North Carolina and all of us who are citizens. Will we stand up in the name of the people of North Carolina and say that children have a right to as much education as they want to pursue? And I think that we as educators and we as citizens must continue that whole idea. On a personal note, I want to let you know that I will be seeking a position this year as the state superintendent. And I don't want to turn this into a political statement, but I want to let you know that there is a council of state that has the 10 elected positions that allows us to have meetings, allows that group to have meetings. And I want to let you know that there will be a conscience on that council of state that will allow for a statement to be made and statements to be put forth that will talk about these kinds of moral issues, whether other people on the council of state want to hear them or not. So I encourage you, not just for our benefit, but to make sure that you look at the election that's coming up and to make sure that we support folks who support the coalition of folks who really believe in the civil rights agenda that we have before us in 2008. Thank you so much for all of us coming together in a coalition without regard to race and creed and color and other issues that sometimes divide us. And I would encourage us to continue to be strong advocates for the children who want a basic education. Thank you. We also have a
Sunny Osment. I have spoken Spanish since I was 10 months old. I go to Carver Elementary School, and I have learned Spanish at school from my friends and in school. No one in my family speaks Spanish. I have friends who speak Spanish, and I have friends who speak English. We all work hard for a good and bright future. How can we have a bright future if some of us are denied our future? How can we have a future if some of us aren't here? I believe we should all have equal rights. I want my friends for life, not just through high school. Now I'm going to say it in Spanish. Mi nombre es Sunny Osme. Yo he hablado español de cuando yo tenía 10 meses. Yo estoy en quinto grado en la escuela Carver Elementary. Yo tengo amigos que hablan español y tengo amigos que hablan inglés. Yo aprendí español en la escuela y de mis amigos. Nadie en mi familia habla español. Todos nosotros hacen un buen trabajo para nosotros futuros. ¿Cómo podemos tener un futuro bueno si no los dejan ir a la universidad? ¿Cómo podemos tener un futuro bueno si algunos están aquí? Yo creo que todos necesitan derechos iguales. Yo quiero mis amigas para toda mi vida, no solo al final de escuela secundaria.